What if I told you that uh, the little cloud icon on your phone's weather app is actually the product of a cutthroat, like $8 billion decade-long battle in space?
I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but it is very real.
Right. Because when you groggily check the forecast to decide if you need a jacket, there's this expectation of, seamless instant information. You probably just assume a government satellite beams it down.
Most people do.
Yeah. But today, we have our hands on a blueprint that really changes everything you might assume about how the U.S. government operates in orbit.
We do. We are looking at a draft request for proposal. Specifically, it's RFP 1305 M426R0011.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, exactly. Issued on March 12, 2026 by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA.
Right.
And on the surface, it's this incredibly dense, highly technical government contracting document. It reads like, pure bureaucratic legalese.
Oh, for sure.
But underneath all that jargon is the literal mechanical framework for how the United States government actually buys commercial space data.
And that is our mission for you on this deep dive.
Yeah.
We are going to decode this massive document because every time you rely on environmental data, you're relying on the mechanisms detailed right here in these pages.
Exactly. It dictates the exact journey of this critical data.
From a commercial satellite floating in the vacuum of space, down through a highly regulated supply chain, into the government's hands, and ultimately to your screen.
Okay, let's unpack this because a request for proposal, or an RFP, it sounds like a simple price check, right? Like someone wants to buy a car, they ask for a price.
Right.
But this is the government setting the rules of engagement for an entire aerospace sector.
It really is. The government is establishing this sweeping framework called the ProTech 2.0 program.
Okay.
ProTech stands for Professional, Scientific, and Technical Services. And NOAA already has 4 established domains operating under this program. You've got satellite, oceans, fisheries, and weather.
Right, the big 4.
But this specific RFP, it introduces a brand new 5th domain to that list. And that new domain is Space-Based Environmental Monitoring, or SBEM. But looking at the sources, the real paradigm shift here is what they're actually procuring. I mean, they are not buying satellites.
No, they are not.
They are looking for commercial data as a service. Like, they aren't paying a traditional aerospace contractor to spend a decade building this custom piece of hardware, and they aren't paying for the rocket to launch it.
Nope.
They just want the data feed.
And that distinction fundamentally rewrites the risk profile of space exploration. I mean, historically, the government would issue a spec for a weather satellite, right?
Yeah.
They'd pay a defense contractor billions to design it, build it, launch it. And if the rocket exploded,
Well, that happens.
right, or if the sensor failed in orbit, the taxpayer absorbed that catastrophic loss.
Right.
The government owned the hardware, so they owned the risk.
Wow.
But with data as a service, the commercial space industry takes on 100% of that hardware and launch risk.
That's huge.
The government simply turns on the tap and pays for the environmental data that flows out of it.
And the financial scale of that tap is where this gets completely wild. This is an IDIQ contract, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity.
Right.
The ceiling dollar amount for all orders across the ProTech program is $8 billion. 8 with a B.
It's massive.
And the timeline is a 5-year base period starting September 1, 2026, with an option for another 5 years. So we're looking at a 10-year window of potential spending up to $8 billion.
What's fascinating here is how the government shields itself by shifting the financial burden entirely onto the private sector.
How so?
Well, the financial reality for the companies competing for this contract is incredibly stark. Earning a spot on this IDIQ contract, it does not grant you a fraction of that $8 billion.
Wait, really?
Yeah. If a contractor is awarded a spot, the government's only legal financial guarantee to them during the entire term of the contract is a minimum of $250.
$250. If you are listening right now, you are probably wondering how any company gets a bank loan or venture capital funding to build a multi-million-dollar satellite when their only guaranteed customer revenue is the cost of a nice dinner for 2.
Exactly.
It is mind-blowing. The best way I can think to explain an IDIQ contract is to compare it to like an app store ecosystem.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Earning the contract just gets you developer rights on the platform. It gives you the legal right to list your service, and NOAA hands you a $250 signing bonus for showing up.
Pretty much.
But you don't actually have any revenue yet. You still have to fight tooth and nail for the users to download your app. which in this case means winning the individual task orders issued by the government.
And by using this IDIQ structure, NOAA makes zero promises about how much atmospheric data they will actually buy from any specific company on that platform. Furthermore, the document notes that these individual task orders will be issued on a firm fixed price or firm fixed unit price basis.
Meaning, if a specific task order asks for, say, a year of ocean surface wind data, and the winning bid is $1 million, the government pays exactly $1 million.
Yes.
If the commercial company's satellite breaks down and it costs them $2 million to fix it just to deliver that data, the company eats the loss.
Exactly. The contractor cannot exceed the maximum rates they establish in their initial proposal. They have to constantly compete against the other companies in that App Store ecosystem at the task order level.
Sounds brutal.
It forces the commercial space sector to be ruthlessly efficient, innovative, and cost-effective. Holding the master contract guarantees them nothing but the right to compete.
But if you establish this ecosystem, how do you manage the technology over a massive 10-year timeline? I mean, 10 years is an absolute eternity in the tech world. The space technology being developed in 2026 is going to look like a rotary phone by 2036.
NOAA built a specific provision into this contract called on-ramping to address that exact problem of technological obsolescence.
On-ramping.
Right. The solicitation does not close and lock out the rest of the industry for a decade. The document states that the government reserves the right to evaluate new proposals every 6 months from the date of the initial contract award.
This mechanism completely alters the competitive landscape. Every 6 months, the government opens the door to see if any new startups have developed better, faster, or cheaper space-based environmental monitoring tech.
Yep.
And if they have, they can be on-ramped onto the IDIQ contract, sharing in whatever is left of that $8 billion ceiling.
It creates a perpetual state of competition. The original winners can never rest on their laurels because they know fresh, hungry startups are allowed to enter the ecosystem twice a year.
Wait. I have to push back on this.
Okay.
Put yourself in the shoes of a private space company CEO.
Yeah.
You just spent millions in R&D and legal fees jumping through bureaucratic hoops to win this highly competitive contract.
Sure.
Now, the government just lets fresh competitors join your exclusive club every 6 months. And it gets worse. Looking at the Exchange of Acquisition Information Clause, it states that by submitting a proposal, NOAA is allowed to share your proprietary information with a group called ICANNs.
That's right.
And that includes NASA, the Department of Defense, the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, and the Department of the Interior. They take my closely guarded proprietary proposal and share it with the DoD and NASA. That sounds absolutely terrifying for a private business trying to protect its intellectual property edge.
From a purely protective corporate standpoint, it sounds like a nightmare. You are essentially opening your playbook to the entire federal government.
Exactly.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a brilliantly necessary strategy for the taxpayer. ICAMS is the Interagency Committee for Advancing Weather Services. The goal here is unifying the entire federal weather enterprise.
But why does the Department of Energy or the DoD need to see my specific weather satellite proposal submitted to NOAA?
Because for decades, different government agencies have been buying similar data in completely isolated silos. They were essentially paying for the same information multiple times.
Oh, wow.
The DoD needs environmental data for naval operations and flight paths. The Department of Energy needs space weather data to understand how solar flares might impact the national power grid. By sharing these proposals through ICAMS, NOAA is breaking down those silos.
I'm still stuck on the risk to the company, though. I mean, what prevents the DoD from just taking my tech specs and giving them to a defense contractor?
Well, the sharing is strictly internal for acquisition planning. It's governed by strict non-disclosure firewalls. It is not a public release.
Okay, that makes sense.
And for a private company, the trade-off is actually massive. Yes, you share your technical approach with other agencies, but in return, you gain direct visibility to the deepest pockets in the world. If you have a truly revolutionary commercial weather solution, NOAA ensures that the Department of Defense and NASA know about it instantly. It turns the fragmented U.S. government into a massively efficient, unified buyer.
Okay, that clarifies the mechanism. It's about centralizing the purchasing power of the entire government so they aren't tripping over each other in the commercial market.
Exactly.
So if the government is constantly evaluating new companies every 6 months and sharing this across agencies, how do they actually know the data is scientifically accurate and not just commercial junk? Who is checking the math on these billion-dollar decisions?
The evaluation process relies heavily on specialized external expertise. The document explicitly includes a notice of participation of non-government personnel.
Okay.
It lists two specific outside organizations that assist in evaluating the proposals. You have the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, UTR, and the Science and Technology Corporation, STC.
And the document is careful to note that they act as non-voting subject matter experts and are bound by strict non-disclosure agreements.
Right.
I thought of this like those highly specialized guest judges they bring onto cooking competition shows.
Oh, I like that.
Like, when the main judges are tasting a complex regional dish, they bring in an absolute master of that specific cuisine. The guest judge might not cast the final vote that sends the chef home, but their expert palate heavily influences the outcome.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
If the guest judge says the dish is technically flawed, the main judges listen. UCAR and STC are the master chefs of atmospheric science here.
Because the government recognizes its own limitations. Commercial space data is advancing at such a breakneck pace that federal contracting officers simply cannot keep up with the cutting-edge physics and engineering involved.
Makes sense.
They need the absolute top academic and private sector scientific minds in the room to help them separate truly viable next-generation orbital technology from well-marketed science fiction.
But it's not just about the cold, hard science of orbital mechanics. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Built right into this highly technical space contract is a strict requirement for social good. There's an entire section detailing subcontracting with AbilityOne nonprofit organizations.
The AbilityOne program is one of the largest sources of employment in the United States for people who are blind or have significant disabilities.
Right.
And the RFP specifically mandates that contractors must include AbilityOne as a separate, distinct goal on their subcontracting plan.
Which begs the question, how does a commercial space company actually utilize nonprofits for the blind in a contract about environmental monitoring satellites?
Yeah.
They aren't building the rockets.
No, but space data contracts require massive amounts of terrestrial infrastructure to function. You have petabytes of environmental data streaming down that needs to be processed, cataloged, and archived.
Right.
You have IT help desks, administrative support, facility management for ground stations, and secure document processing. The government is essentially mandating that as these commercial companies scale up their operations to handle this multi-billion-dollar data feed, they must carve out specific subcontracting roles in those support areas for AbilityOne organizations.
It radically changes how you view federal procurement. The government isn't just utilizing its purchasing power to buy environmental data from orbit. It is simultaneously using that $8 billion lever to enforce employment equity right here on the ground.
It's powerful.
When a private space company bids on this contract, they aren't just selling data. They are bidding to become a partner in the government's broader societal infrastructure.
It demonstrates that federal contracts are multifaceted policy tools. You cannot separate the technical deliverable from the social and ethical requirements of the buyer.
Yeah.
And that transition from overarching social goals to strict individual behavioral compliance is incredibly prominent in the latter half of this document.
The guardrails for human behavior required to keep this government money are intense. First, there are the standard post-government employment restrictions, the revolving door rules.
Right, the usual stuff.
You can't work as a NOAA official designing this procurement and then immediately jump ship to a massive salary at the private space company bidding on it.
That is standard conflict of interest mitigation. But the document then dedicates a highly detailed multi-page section to the NOAA Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Prevention and Response Policy, the SASH policy.
Yes.
It dictates that NOAA strictly prohibits sexual assault and harassment by or of any employee, contractor, vendor, or affiliate.
And they enforce this everywhere. The text specifically notes that this applies to incidents occurring while performing work at remote locations, like field camps, isolated ground stations, or at sea. So what does this all mean?
Well,
Is it common for a highly technical data as a service contract to spend so much time detailing HR policies, promoting a 247 global SASH helpline, and demanding exact training timelines?
this raises an important question about the physical realities of space-based environmental monitoring. We think of this as a sterile digital transaction, data from space to a server.
Yeah.
But ground truth calibration, Maintaining remote antenna arrays in Alaska and deploying oceanic data collection buoys often require personnel to be deployed in highly isolated, high-pressure, and male-dominated environments.
It's very true.
NOAA is making it unequivocally clear that the safety and dignity of the humans operating the equipment are just as critical as the telemetry the equipment produces.
And the administrative burden and enforcement mechanisms are not suggestions. Contractors must provide mandatory training to all employees assigned to the contract within exactly 30 days of the award.
Right.
Furthermore, they have to submit concrete evidence of this annual training, itemized by name and date, by March 1st of every single year.
The remedies for failing to comply are where the true weight of this policy is felt. It is not a slap on the wrist. If a contractor fails to execute this training, or if their employees violate the policy in the field, the government retains severe contractual options.
What kind of options?
They can require the immediate removal of an employee from the project. They can force the termination of a subcontract. They can suspend all contract payments.
Or they can deploy the nuclear option, terminating the entire contract for default or cause.
Exactly.
It absolutely does not matter if your company is providing the most pristine, high-resolution, critical orbital data in the world. If you fail to maintain a safe, harassment-free environment for the people working on the ground or at sea, the government will shut off the tap.
Yep.
You lose your spot in the ecosystem. It elevates human dignity to the exact same level of contractual importance as the technical performance of a satellite.
It is a comprehensive system of accountability. You must deliver the data. You must constantly innovate to survive the 6-month on-ramping. You must share your capabilities across the federal government. You must subcontract for social equity. And you must maintain strict behavioral compliance.
It is a massive, highly regulated machine disguised as a simple little weather app icon.
It really is.
So let's take a breath and recap the sheer scale of the mechanics we've just unpacked from this RFP. We started by looking at the paradigm shift of data as a service, where the government stops buying custom hardware and simply subscribes to the feed.
Right.
We explored the financial gauntlet of the ProTech 2.0 program, the staggering $8 billion ceiling balanced against the terrifying reality of a $250 minimum guarantee for the contractors, forcing them to compete for every single firm fixed-price task order.
We examined the revolving door of competition, with NOAA avoiding technological lock-in by evaluating new proposals every 6 months. We saw how the government breaks down purchasing silos by sharing that intelligence across the entire federal weather enterprise through ICAMs, ensuring the DoD and NASA benefit from commercial innovations.
We highlighted the invisible hands of the guest judges from UTR and STC, ensuring the science is sound. We uncovered how a multi-billion-dollar space data contract practically integrates social policy by mandating subcontracting goals for ground support to empower blind and severely disabled Americans through Ability One.
And finally, we detailed the strict, non-negotiable human guardrails, where failing to protect employees from harassment in a remote field camp can literally cost a company their multi-million-dollar space contract.
The next time you wake up, grab your phone and check the forecast to see if it's going to rain. I hope you remember the absolute gauntlet of innovation, ruthless financial competition, and strict regulation that procured the data powering that tiny digital icon.
It is a profound evolution of public-private partnership, moving from government-owned monopolies in space to a dynamic commercial ecosystem.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Right.
We spent all this time talking about how this entire contract is based on data as a service.
Right.
The government is no longer building or launching the hardware. They are shifting the risk to the private sector and just subscribing to the feed, much like you or I subscribe to a streaming service.
Yeah.
If this model proves successful over the 10-year lifespan of this contract, and commercial space companies continue to iterate and innovate far faster than government bureaucracies ever could, what happens to the very concept of a government weather satellite in 20 or 30 years?
It's a great question.
Will the United States government eventually own no environmental satellites at all? Are we watching the transition of the federal government from the ultimate pioneer of space exploration into nothing more than a wealthy subscriber to a commercial data feed? It is a wild thought. Until next time, keep looking up and keep asking questions.